My name is Kaylin, and when I was 29 years old, I never imagined that my father's wedding would turn into such a life-changing event. For most of my life, my dad introduced me to people with a slight frown, saying I was just a security guard. He never called me a professional, never mentioned my achievements, just those 3 words that made me feel small every single time. To him, I had chosen the wrong career, a career that didn't fit his world of wealth and reputation. But on the day of his 3rd wedding, everything shifted. What I did for a living suddenly mattered in a way no one could have predicted. I can still remember the look on his face when my name was shouted across the room, followed by people pointing toward the television screens. His shock, his disbelief, his silence, that moment is burned into my memory. To understand how everything reached that point, you have to know a little about my dad and me. His name is Donovan Hartwell, and his whole life has always revolved around status and appearances. He worked as a senior investment banker at one of New York's most powerful firms. Success, to him, wasn't about happiness or purpose. It was about numbers on a bank account, who you knew, and how many people admired you. Our house while I was growing up was spotless, picture perfect, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a luxury magazine. Family vacations weren't about bonding or making memories, they were about showing off. Everything had to be staged, polished, and presentable, right down to the photographs he displayed on his office desk. But behind all that shine, our relationship wasn't easy. My dad's expectations were impossible, and no matter what I did, it never felt like enough. When I was 12, my parents divorced. My mom, Marissa, had reached her breaking point after years of Donovan's absence and emotional distance. She was a kindergarten teacher, the complete opposite of my dad. She believed in kindness, patience, and heart over competition. The way they viewed the world was so different that it was only a matter of time before they split. After the divorce, I lived with Mom during the week in her small, cozy apartment. On weekends, I was with Dad in his glassy penthouse overlooking Central Park. At first, I thought the contrast was fun to different worlds, but as I got older, the tension grew. Dad had my whole life mapped out before I even finished middle school. In his mind, I was supposed to attend a top university, go on to law school, then join one of his friends' firms. Everything was neatly planned, as if I were one of his business projects. So, when I announced after high school that I wanted to join the military, he looked at me like I'd lost my mind. The military, he had scoffed over dinner one weekend. Kaylin, people from our kind of background don't enlist. If they serve at all, they go in as officers. Enlisting is beneath you. But I didn't see it that way. I wanted to prove something to myself, to push beyond the sheltered bubble of my dad's world. I wanted discipline, challenge, and a sense of purpose. So the first enlisted anyway. Those 4 years in the army changed me. I learned discipline, leadership, and how to keep calm in moments of danger. More importantly, I found my passion for security and protection. After my honorable discharge, I went to college using my GI Bill while earning my degree in criminal justice. I worked part-time as a campus security officer. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me experience, and I was proud of myself. Slowly, I built a career that mattered to me, even if it never impressed my father. By the time I turned 29, I had worked my way up to a senior role at Meridian Protective Services, one of the country's most respected private security firms. We handled everything from executive protection to high-profile events. My specialty was threat assessment. In fact, I had just led security for an international conference attended by diplomats, which earned my team major recognition. My supervisor even nominated me for a professional award, but none of this meant anything to Dad. To him, wearing a uniform instead of a power suit meant I had failed. His definition of success was so narrow that anything outside it was invisible. When his wedding invitation arrived in the mail, my first instinct was to throw it away. The cream-colored card was thick, with shiny gold lettering. Donovan Hartwell and Vivian Lane request the honor of your presence. Everything about it screamed luxury. This was his 3rd wedding, and his bride-to-be Vivian came from a wealthy family deeply rooted in the banking world. She was elegant, polished, and always seen in the pages of glossy magazines. She and my dad had met at some fancy charity gala, and of course, their engagement was big news in the society pages. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go. What was the point of showing up just to be introduced again as just a security guard? When I showed the invitation to my best friend Taryn over coffee, she leaned across the table and said, "You should go." "Different how?" I asked. stirring my latte without much interest. He'll just introduce me as his disappointment of a daughter who chose security over law school. Taryn smirked. Then prove him wrong. Show up looking amazing. Be polite, be confident, and don't let him make you feel small. Her words got me thinking. Maybe I could go, not to please him, but to remind myself that I was proud of the life I had built. Shopping for something to wear turned into an all-day venture with Taryn. We tried on dresses in store after store, until we finally found a navy blue dress that looked elegant without being flashy. I paired it with silver jewelry, nothing over the top, but classy. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a little spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would see me differently this time, not as a failure, but as a professional. The night before the wedding, I called my mom for support. Just remember, sweetheart, Mom said gently. If your father can't appreciate your choices, that's his failure, not yours. You've built a life that makes you proud, and that's what matters. Her words settled in my heart like a protective shield. Still, deep inside, I couldn't help but hope for something more. Some small sign that my dad could finally see my worth. That hope was what made me pack carefully my dress, my heels, the invitation, and a little bit of courage. What I didn't know was that this wedding would turn into a weekend that changed everything by the next afternoon. I was in a taxi pulling up to the Rosewood Resort, a massive luxury property spread across manicured gardens and a private beach. From the window, I could see huge white tents glowing in the sun, decorated with flowers and crystals. Even from far away, I could tell this wedding was going to be over the top. Inside, the lobby was buzzing with guests checking in. Most of them were people from my dad's world, wealthy men in tailored casual wear, women in sundresses with perfect hair and expensive handbags. I instantly felt out of place, even though I was wearing my carefully chosen dress. Kalen, my father's voice carried across the lobby. I turned to see him approaching with Vivian on his arm. They looked like they had stepped straight out of a lifestyle magazine. You made it, he said. His greeting was polite but cold, a quick kiss on the cheek that didn't feel warm at all. Vivian gave me a practiced smile. So glad you could join us, she said, though her eyes had already drifted toward more important guests walking in behind me. The rehearsal dinner is at 6. Do make yourself comfortable. And just like that, they moved on, leaving me standing there with my overnight bag. A bellhop appeared and took my luggage up to my room. I found myself alone, with hours to kill before the evening's dinner. I tried to shake off the sting of that chilly welcome, but a part of me knew it was just the beginning. The rehearsal dinner was set up in a private dining room that overlooked the ocean. The whole place looked like it belonged on a postcard. Round tables covered in white linen filled the space, each one decorated with tall vases of orchids and roses. Everything smelled expensive: flowers, candles, even the wine glasses that seemed to sparkle brighter than normal. Each guest had an assigned seat, written in perfect calligraphy on little cards. My name was way off to the side, at a table far from the head table where my father and Vivian would sit. It was clear I wasn't part of the inner circle. I tried to shrug it off, sipping a glass of wine while guests filed in, chatting about their portfolios, vacation homes, and stock options. I felt like I'd accidentally walked into a business conference instead of a family event. Not long after, my dad appeared at my table with an older couple in tow. His voice was smooth, practiced, the same tone he always used when making introductions. This is my daughter Kaylin, he said casually. She's a security guard, just like that. No mention of my degree, no mention of my years in the army, no mention of my senior role at one of the most respected firms in the country. Just a security guard. The woman gave me a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. How interesting, she said, clearly struggling to think of anything else. The man tried to rescue the awkwardness. Donovan tells us you were in the military. Yes, I replied. Army, for years, active duty. Well, thank you for your service, he said quickly. I could practically see them both looking for a way to exit the conversation, and my father gave it to them. Let me introduce you to Vivian's brother. He just made partner at Goldman Sachs. They moved away, and I caught the woman whispering as they left. A security guard, with Donovan's connections. She could have been anything. My stomach knotted. That wasn't the last time it happened. Throughout the evening, the same pattern repeated. My dad would walk me up to someone, smile, and say, "This is my daughter Kaylin. She's a security guard." Sometimes he added, "She chose a different path with a shrug that spoke louder than words. Each introduction chipped away at me. 15 people, maybe more. And each time, I was stripped down to a job title he used like an insult. By the time dinner was served, I was questioning why I had even come. I excused myself to the restroom, pulling out my phone. As I leaned against the sink, my fingers flew over the screen, texting my best friend, Taryn, that this was a mistake. He's introduced me as just a security guard to everyone. Her reply came almost immediately. Remember why you're proud of what you do. His opinion doesn't change your value. I stared at her words for a long moment, letting them sink in. She was right. Still, the humiliation burned. When I returned to the dining room, I was seated next to the event photographer, a young man with a scruffy beard and kind eyes. He leaned toward me as Donovan held court across the room, surrounded by his circle of powerful friends. Tough crowd, he whispered, nodding toward them. You have no idea, I muttered. I overheard one of your introductions, he admitted. For what it's worth, I think security is way more important than what most of these people do. I'd rather have someone protecting me than another investment banker. His kindness almost brought me to tears. I smiled weakly. Thanks. That means more than you know. We sat in comfortable silence as the evening dragged on. I drank water instead of wine, needing to stay clear-headed. The more I thought about it, the more I wanted to leave first thing in the morning, skip the wedding, avoid the scene, and save myself from another round of introductions. But something inside me kept me rooted. Maybe it was stubborn pride. Maybe it was that tiny, flickering hope that tomorrow would be different. Little did I know. Tomorrow would be very different, but not in any way I could have imagined. The wedding morning came bright and clear. The sky was blue, the air warm, the kind of day people pray for when planning a big outdoor ceremony. I avoided the wedding party completely. Instead, I took a long walk on the beach, the waves crashing against the shore, salty air filling my lungs. It calmed me, gave me space to think. Back in my room, I ate a quiet lunch on my balcony, watching guests begin to gather below. By 3:30, the garden was filling with rows of white chairs facing a floral arch so elaborate it looked like something out of a movie. I slipped into a seat in the very back row, grateful no one paid me much attention. It was easier that way. Easier to avoid another round of humiliation. But as the pre-ceremony bustle unfolded, something caught my eye. A catering staff member moving strangely. His uniform didn't fit right. He looked awkward, unfamiliar with the way servers usually worked. More than that, his eyes moved differently, scanning the crowd, not like someone serving champagne, but like someone assessing targets. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Occupational hazard. Years in security made me notice things others didn't. But then, I saw him exchange a quick glance with two other staff members, the same alertness, the same scanning eyes. My instincts screamed at me. Something was wrong. I discreetly shifted closer, pretending to be looking for a restroom while keeping them in my line of sight. One of the men slipped into a side door that led to the service corridor. Against my better judgment, I followed. The hall was busy with real catering staff rushing in and out. The man I was watching ducked into a storage room at the far end. I waited, pretending to check my phone. Minutes later, the door opened. He emerged with the two others I'd noticed earlier. They spoke in hushed tones, and I managed to catch fragments of their conversation. Rich pickings, 2 million in jewelry alone. After the vows, during the champagne toast, 4 more coming through the east entrance. My blood ran cold. They weren't catering staff. They were planning a robbery. And from the sound of it, they weren't working alone. I backed away quietly from the service hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. The men didn't see me, but I had heard enough. They were planning a robbery, and not some small grabandron from the way they talked. It was going to be a coordinated hit with at least 7 people involved. Ducked into a quiet alcove and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady training kicking in even though my pulse was racing. I called the local police and kept my voice low. "This is Kaylin Hartwell," I said, pulling out my ID card for reassurance even though no one could see it. "I'm with Meridian Protective Services, senior security consultant. I'm at the Rosewood Resort for the Hartwell Lane wedding, and I've just identified a credible threat." The dispatcher didn't waste time. "What kind of threat?" "Armed robbery, coordinated group, at least 3 inside already, possibly 4 more on the way, targeting wealthy guests after the ceremony." I overheard them mention jewelry and a safe. "Stay on the line," she said. "Units are being dispatched." ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes, that might as well have been forever. I thanked her quickly and hung up, then made my way to the resort's security office. It was a small room tucked near the management wing, manned by a single guard who looked about 50 with tired eyes and a name tag that read Carl. He sat watching a wall of camera feeds, looking like he'd been through 1,000 uneventful weddings. I need to speak to your supervisor immediately, I said, flashing my Meridian ID. There's a credible security threat against this wedding. He blinked at me, skeptical. Excuse me. Now, I pressed firmly. Every minute counts. Carl picked up the phone and called his manager. Within minutes, a man in his 40s walked in, crisp uniform, no-nonsense expression. His badge, read Michael Jenkins, Chief of Security. I repeated what I had observed: the uniforms that didn't fit, the scanning eyes, the overheard conversation. Jenkins frowned. We can't disrupt a ceremony based on overheard fragments. The police are already on their way, I said. But you need to act now. These men aren't here to serve champagne. They're here to rob this wedding, maybe worse. You need personnel at every exit and eyes on the east entrance. Now. Something in my tone must have convinced him. He straightened and grabbed his radio, barking orders to his team. Additional security on the east side. Lock down the kitchen doors. Double coverage at the gift table. He turned back to me. Are you carrying? No, I admitted. I'm here as a guest. His lips tightened. Figures, the bride's father only paid for 2 armed guards, covering the gift table. We're undermanned for something like this. They mentioned 4 more coming in, I warned. This isn't a smash and grab, it's a planned operation. Jenkins nodded grimly, then hurried out to position his team. I walked back toward the ceremony area, scanning the crowd. Guests were settling into their seats, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. The musicians tuned their instruments. The floral arch sparkled under the afternoon sun. I slipped into the very back row, half listening as my father, Donovan, stood tall at the altar, waiting for Vivian to make her grand entrance. For a brief moment, as she walked down the aisle, I caught the pure joy on his face. He looked like a man in love, proud, happy, and despite everything, I felt a sting of sadness. This was the father I wished I'd had more often, but my instincts dragged me back to reality. I'd spotted 2 men near the gift table in catering uniforms, too casual, too deliberate. My gut told me they weren't staff. I texted Jenkins their location and description, keeping my eyes locked on them. Then, near the bar setup, another man moved stiffly. His jacket bulged in a way that screamed concealed weapon. My breath caught. This was escalating faster than I thought. As the officiant pronounced my father and Vivian, husband and wife, guests clapped and cheered, but my focus stayed on the suspects, who were now exchanging subtle signals. Where were the police? Why hadn't they arrived yet? The reception began immediately, servers carrying trays of champagne into the garden. Guests stood, chatting and laughing, lining up to congratulate the couple. I weaved through the crowd, pretending to mingle while keeping sight of the suspects. That's when I noticed it. Each man had a tiny earpiece. They were coordinating. I glanced down at my phone. Still no update from the dispatcher. My stomach sank out, then the lights flickered. Just a second, but long enough for my instincts to scream. A planned disruption. And in that moment, I saw the man near the bar reach inside his jacket. Gun, I shouted. My voice cut through the chatter like a blade. Screams erupted. Guests dropped glasses, dove for cover. The man pulled out a pistol, firing a shot into the air. Nobody moved. He barked. This is a robbery. Do as we say, and no one gets hurt. 2 more men drew weapons. The ones near the gift table began sweeping jewelry and watches into bags, shouting at terrified guests to hand over valuables. Chaos spread like wildfire. I ducked behind an overturned table, scanning the scene. At least 7 armed men, 30 guests, maybe more, huddled in fear. No police in sight yet. The resort guards hung back, outgunned. I spotted my father near the front, holding Vivian protectively. One of the robbers was already moving toward them, gun raised. My breath came steady, my mind sharpened. This was it. The moment training was meant for. Do I warn Donovan, risk triggering violence, or stay quiet and wait for backup? Seconds mattered. I tightened my grip on my phone and slid lower behind the table, every muscle coiled, ready. The decision had been made for me. I couldn't just sit there. The first gunshot shattered the perfect wedding illusion like glass hitting concrete. 1 second, people were clapping and sipping champagne. The next, screams cut through the air as guests ducked, chairs toppled, and fear spread like fire. Everybody down, nobody moves. The man with the pistol shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. Hand over your jewelry, your watches, your purses. Do as we say, and you'll live. 2 more men drew weapons, and suddenly the reception looked more like a hostage scene than a celebration. The suspects moved with purpose. They weren't amateurs every step. Every shout was calculated. I pressed against the floor behind an overturned table, my breath steady despite the chaos. Training had drilled into me that panic solves nothing. My eyes scanned quickly, taking inventory. 7 suspects confirmed, 3 with visible firearms, the rest carrying duffel bags, grabbing valuables. Guests 30 to 40, crouched in terror, some crying, some frozen in shock. Security, resort guards hiding near the perimeter, hesitant to move in. They weren't equipped for this, and my father Donovan was standing near the front, one arm around Vivian trying to shield her. A robber was already barking at them to hand over jewelry. Then something pulled my attention sharply. Near me, at another table, an elderly woman collapsed. Her breathing was ragged, her face pale, hands clutching her chest. Her husband looked terrified. Please, she needs her medication, he begged, his voice shaking. One of the robbers stormed toward them, gun raised. Shut her up, he snapped. The old man held up trembling hands. She's sick, she needs help, please. The robber cocked his head, annoyed. I said shut her up. He aimed the gun at the woman. In that instant, my choice was clear. I rose slowly, keeping my hands visible. I'm a medic, I lied firmly. Let me help her before she has a full cardiac episode. You don't want a death on your hands. That's murder, not robbery. The gunman glared at me, caught between anger and calculation. For a moment, I thought he'd shoot me just for speaking. But then he jerked his weapon toward the old woman. Make it fast. I moved carefully, kneeling beside her. Her skin was clammy, her breaths shallow. She was, indeed, in distress. I placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking softly. You're okay. Deep breaths. Focus on me. Out of the corner of my eye, I tracked the robbers' positions. The leader, a tall man with sharp features, was making his way toward my father. He pointed at Donovan's watch, an expensive gold timepiece. The watch, now. My father's hands shook as he unbuckled it. Take it, he stammered, voice cracking. Vivian sobbed as the robber pointed at her necklace, a sparkling diamond piece that probably cost more than my yearly salary. She unclasped it, tears streaming, and handed it over. The leader pocketed the jewelry, then pressed his gun to my father's temple. The safe code, the bridal suite. Now, my father's face drained of color. I don't know it. I'd have to check my phone. No phones, the leader snarled, shoving the barrel harder against his head. My heart clenched. For all his arrogance, all his dismissal, he was still my dad. I couldn't sit still while a gun was at his head. Something inside me snapped. I looked across the room, caught Jenkins, the security chief, watching me. I gave a subtle nod. He understood, tensing as if waiting for my move. There's a master list of codes at the front desk. I called out loudly, standing up slowly. I work here. I can get it for you. The leader's eyes narrowed, gun still pressed against Donovan. Work here. Doing what? Security? I said, letting my voice ring with authority. I know the resort protocols. For a second, his suspicion battled with his greed. Then he motioned me closer with his free hand, still holding the gun, with the other as he stepped within arm's reach. Time slowed. My training surged forward. Years of drills, of repetition, of knowing exactly how to move when danger was a breath away. In one fluid motion, I grabbed his weapon arm, twisted hard, and drove my knee into his solar plexus. The gun clattered from his grip as he doubled over, gasping. Gasps and shouts erupted across the room. I scooped up the weapon, flicking the safety instinctively, and held it steady. Down, I barked at the robber, my voice cutting like steel. The other suspects reacted instantly. One fired in my direction, the shot ripping through the air. A searing pain lanced across my upper arm. My dress sleeve darkened with blood, but I didn't let go of the weapon. Using the leader's own body as cover, I shouted across the room. Now, Jenkins and his security team surged forward. 2 undercover police officers, who had been mingling disguised as guests, drew their weapons as well. Gunfire erupted, short and sharp. The suspects faltered, their confidence cracking as they realized they were outnumbered. Some raised their hands, surrendering. One bolted toward the kitchen, dragging a terrified server with him as a human shield. I handed the subdued leader to an officer and ran after the fleeing robber, ignoring the throbbing pain in my arm. The kitchen smelled of herbs and roasted meat, an odd contrast to the chaos. Pots clanged as staff ducked behind counters. I tracked the suspect to the loading dock. He held the young server tight, gun pressed to her head. Back off, or I'll kill her. I held my ground, raising my voice calm and steady. You don't want to do this. Armed robbery is one thing, murder is another. Pull that trigger, and your life is over. His eyes darted nervously. Sweat dripped down his temple. He tightened his grip, the girl sobbing in terror. There's no way out, I continued. The building is surrounded. Drop the weapon, let her go, and you might see daylight again someday. For a tense moment, silence hung between us. Then his hand wavered just slightly, but enough. I lunged, striking his wrist, sending the gun clattering across the floor. I shoved the hostage behind me and locked the man in a restraint hold I'd practiced 100 times before. Within seconds, police officers stormed in, securing him. Only then did I let myself collapse to one knee, clutching my bleeding arm. The sound of sirens echoed faintly in the distance as more police units poured into the resort grounds. The chaos slowly shifted into controlled order. Armed suspects lay cuffed on the ground, valuables were collected for evidence, and shaken guests were being guided to safety. I sat on the edge of a stainless steel counter in the kitchen, my arm throbbing as a paramedic pressed a thick gauze pad against the bleeding wound. My dress sleeve was ruined, soaked dark red. Adrenaline was fading, and with it came the raw ache of pain. You were lucky, the paramedic muttered as he secured the bandage. Clean graze, no bone or artery damage. You'll need stitches, but it's not life-threatening. I nodded, gritting my teeth. Check the guests first. There's an older woman out there, she went into cardiac distress. He frowned at me, clearly annoyed by my insistence, but he radioed for another Manek to check on her. As I slid off the counter, steadying myself against the wall, I caught sight of my father entering the kitchen. His face was pale, his eyes locked on the blood soaking through the bandage. Kaylin, he breathed. You're hurt. It's just a graze, I said quickly, though my arm pulsed with sharp pain. Are you and Vivian okay? He blinked, still staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. We're fine, because of you. Before I could respond, the police captain walked in, his uniform crisped despite the chaos. Miss Hartwell, we need your statement, but first thank you. If you hadn't noticed the threat when you did, this could have ended in a massacre. I swallowed, shaking my head. I did what I was trained to do. The captain exchanged a look with one of his officers. These men are part of a crew that's hit 3 other high-profile events this year. They usually leave witnesses behind. You may have just saved everyone here. I felt the weight of his words but kept my expression steady. I was in the right place at the right time. Nothing more. The captain's eyes softened. Humility doesn't change the fact that you're a hero. Out in the reception hall, guests were buzzing, whispering my name, pointing discreetly. The story was already spreading. Someone said loudly enough for me to hear, "That's Donovan's daughter. Did you see what she did?" My cheeks flushed. I wasn't used to being the center of attention. Donovan stepped closer, lowering his voice. The police told me. You saved lives today. Mine, Vivienne's. I couldn't bring myself to look at him fully. I was just doing my job, Dad. Even if you think it's just being a security guard. His face reddened, shame flickering in his eyes. He opened his mouth but closed it again, words stuck in his throat. Vivienne appeared at his side. Mascara streaked down her cheeks but her posture still elegant. We're so grateful, Kaylin. Truly. I nodded stiffly. You should focus on your guests. I'll give my statement and then head back to my room. The wedding reception was officially cancelled. The venue was now a crime scene. Detectives moved through the crowd, taking statements, bagging evidence, and interviewing witnesses. Guests clung to each other, still shaken, many of them sneaking glances at me as though I were some character ripped from an action movie. As I made my way back to my room, trying to avoid attention, I saw a local news crew setting up cameras outside the resort gates. Guests were already speaking into microphones, their voices trembling with adrenaline as they recounted the dramatic attempted robbery foiled by a wedding guest. I ducked past quickly, not wanting to be caught on camera. The last thing I needed was reporters knocking on my door. Back in my room, I peeled off the ruined dress and carefully washed the blood from my skin, wincing at every sting of the wound. I pulled on the only spare outfit I had, packed a simple black pantsuit, then collapsed on the bed. Exhaustion crashed over me. My body was drained, my mind spinning with images of guns, terrified faces, and my father's expression as a weapon pressed against his head. Despite the heaviness in my chest, sleep came quickly, pulling me into darkness. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing non-stop. My arm throbbed beneath fresh bandages, but the notifications on my screen jolted me more than the pain. Taryn had texted a dozen times. "Girl, are you alive? I saw the news. Call me." My boss, at Meridian, Marcus Chen, had left 2 voicemails. "We're proud of you. Call me back when you can. The company is standing behind you." Even a few old army buddies had sent messages. "Saw what happened. Damn, Kaylin, you're a legend." But the one that made me pause was a voicemail from my mom. "Sweetheart, I just saw the news this morning. Call me as soon as you can. I'm so proud of you, but I'm worried too." My throat tightened as I listened to her voice. Curiosity tugged at me. I turned on the hotel TV. A news anchor was speaking into the camera. "Breaking news. Attempted armed robbery at the Rosewood Resort wedding, foiled by security expert Kaylin Hartwell. 7 suspects are now in custody after a dramatic intervention by a wedding guest, who is also a decorated Army veteran and senior operative at Meridian Protective Services." Footage rolled. Shaky cell phone video showed glimpses of the chaos, me disarming the leader, the gunshots, guests screaming. The anchor's voice continued. Guests describe Hartwell's actions as heroic, saying she saved multiple lives, including those of her father, prominent banker Donovan Hartwell, and his bride, Vivian Lane. I stared at the screen, almost disconnected from what I was seeing. It didn't feel like they were talking about me. The police captain appeared in a clip, praising my actions. Security experts weighed in, calling my recognition of the threat textbook perfect. And then, one guest's interview played. She moved like she'd done it 100 times before. Calm, precise. Honestly, it was like something out of a movie. I clicked off the TV, my chest tight. This wasn't what I came here for. I just wanted to survive the weekend, not end up plastered across every local station as the hero daughter. Still, the news was out. There was no stopping it now. The morning after the chaos, the Rosewood Resort looked strangely normal from the outside. The gardens were still trimmed to perfection. The ocean still sparkled under the sun, and the staff moved about as if nothing had happened. But inside, everyone knew things had changed. The wedding reception was gone. The decorations had been torn down overnight, and the ballroom had been taped off as a crime scene. Instead, a quieter brunch had been set up in a smaller dining hall. The mood was subdued. Guests spoke in hushed voices, as though raising their volume might shatter what was left of the weekend. I debated skipping it entirely. My arm ached from stitches, my head throbbed from lack of sleep, and I had no desire to be stared at like some kind of zoo exhibit. But the detectives wanted to follow up, and I figured showing my face might keep things simpler. So, I slipped into my black pantsuit, the only other outfit I'd packed. It wasn't glamorous, especially with one sleeve fitting awkwardly over my bandaged arm. But it would have to do. The dining room was filled with round tables covered in white linen. Platters of fruit, pastries, and eggs sat untouched, as though people weren't sure if eating felt appropriate after what had happened. I had barely stepped inside when Vivian spotted me. She left her conversation mid-sentence and hurried to me, her heels clicking against the tile. "Caitlin, thank you for coming," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Her usual polished exterior was cracked, revealing something almost human beneath. "How's your arm?" "It'll heal," I said simply. "I understand the detectives wanted to talk again." "Yes, they should be here shortly," she replied. She hesitated, then added, "Donovan has been trying to explain to everyone how proud he is of you. It's just been such a shock, all of this." I nodded, not trusting myself to respond. Pride. Coming from him, it sounded less like pride and more like damage control. As I moved toward the buffet to grab coffee, I felt eyes following me. Guests who had barely acknowledged me at the rehearsal dinner were now staring openly. Some whispered behind their hands, others offered stiff smiles. It was clear, yesterday I was an embarrassment. Today, I was the headline. At a table near the window, my father sat surrounded by his closest friends. His voice carried easily, confident and loud. As always, I caught fragments as I approached. "Always knew she had potential," he was saying. "That military training really paid off, didn't it?" I froze mid-step. Was he taking credit for my actions? Rewriting history to make it seem like he'd always supported me? My stomach twisted with anger. Before I could decide whether to confront him, a staff member approached and told me the detectives were ready to speak with me privately. Grateful for the escape, I followed her to a side room. The interview was straightforward. They asked for more details about the suspects' positions, the timeline, and how I had identified the threat. They confirmed all 7 men were in custody and connected to at least 3 other robberies at upscale events. You'll likely be called to testify when this goes to trial, one detective explained, and there's already talk about a civilian commendation. I shook my head. I wasn't looking for recognition. I just did what I had to do. Plenty of people freeze in situations like that. The detective replied, "You didn't. That makes all the difference." When I returned to the brunch, I planned to make a quick exit, grab my bag, head for the train station, and leave this whole weekend behind me. But my father had other ideas. "There she is," he called out as I entered, drawing every eye in the room. The hero of the hour. Heat rushed to my face as conversations stopped. People stared. Some clapped lightly, others leaned forward with interest. My father approached, draping an arm around my shoulders like we were suddenly close. The gesture felt foreign, forced. "I was just telling everyone," he said loudly, "how Kellen's always had this protective streak. Remember when she was 10 and stood up to that bully at school, always looking out for others?" I stiffened under his arm. His selective memory was nauseating. He wasn't celebrating me. He was using me to polish his own image. "Dad, I should really get going," I muttered. "I've got a train to catch." "Nonsense," he said, tightening his grip. "People want to hear about your work now." The way he said your work was different than before. Not dismissive. Almost boastful. Like suddenly being in security was acceptable because it made him look good. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could, a commotion rose near the bar. Someone had turned up the volume on the wall-mounted TV. "We have more details on yesterday's dramatic foiling of an armed robbery at the Rosewood Resort," the anchor announced. Every head in the room turned toward the screen. The segment began with a professional photo of Metha One Meridian, used on its website. My name scrolled across the bottom, Kaylin Hartwell, Senior Security Specialist. Then came the footage. Surveillance clips from the venue showed me moving with precision, disarming the leader, shielding guests, signaling to security. The cell phone videos caught the chaos, the shouting. The moment I lunged at the gunman holding the elderly woman hostage, gasps rippled through the brunch. Guests who had barely spoken to me yesterday now gawked in awe. Then, in a shaky clip, someone shouted, "Holy, she's on the news." All eyes swiveled toward me. I stood frozen by the doorway, coffee cup in hand, heart pounding. And then I looked at my father. Donovan's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor. He didn't even flinch at the sound. He just stared at the screen, his face a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and something else, something that might have been the beginning of real respect. The room erupted in murmurs, guests pointing between me and the television. For the first time in years, my father was speechless, and in that silence, everything shifted. The clink of broken glass still echoed faintly as staff rushed forward to sweep up the shards of champagne around my father's expensive shoes. But Donovan didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on the television, where the news replayed the moment I disarmed the lead robber. Then cut to the part where I freed the server from the gunman at the loading dock. The hush in the room broke like a dam. "Oh my goodness, that's her. Unbelievable. She saved everyone here." Guests who had barely nodded at me the night before were suddenly leaning across tables, whispering in awe. Some even clapped softly, though no one seemed sure if applauding was appropriate. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. My instinct was to shrink into the corner, but instead I stood straighter, clutching the coffee cup tighter in my hand. My father's expression shifted. Shock gave way to something else, something heavier. Before I could process it, guests began approaching. "Kaylin, is it true you served in the army?" one of my father's business associates asked. "You work for Meridian, don't you?" another chimed in. "Didn't they handle security for the governor's inaugural ball? How did you even know those men weren't catering staff?" A woman in pearls leaned forward eagerly. I answered politely but briefly, trying not to let my discomfort show. "Yes, I served for years. Yes, I work for Meridian. Training teaches." You too notice small inconsistencies, but each question felt surreal. Less than 24 hours ago, these same people barely looked at me. Now, they spoke as if I were someone worth admiring. Across the room, Donovan hadn't moved from his spot. Eleanor stood beside him, whispering something I couldn't hear. He nodded slowly, then finally looked at me, not with dismissal, not with disdain, but with an expression I couldn't read. I excused myself from the crowd of guests and walked toward him. His face was pale, his hand trembling slightly as he set down a fresh glass of champagne he hadn't touched. "Dad," I said softly. "Kaylin." His voice was rough, unsteady, so unlike the confident banker tone he always carried. He hesitated, then added, "The news report said you're up for a civilian bravery award. Is that true?" I nodded slightly. "So they told me, not that I asked for it. And you work for Meridian." He paused, almost in disbelief. "The top security firm in the country. You've been with them for years." "Yes," I said evenly. 3 years now. I mentioned it at Christmas last year, but you were too busy talking about the stock market with Uncle Martin." He winced. His polished image cracked further. "I see." Eleanor touched his arm gently. "Donovan, maybe you and Kaylin should talk privately." For once, he agreed without argument. He gestured toward a quiet alcove off the dining room, away from the curious stares. I followed, my heart thudding, unsure of what this conversation would bring. When we were alone, he cleared his throat, but the words didn't come easily. "The news is saying you saved lives yesterday, including mine and Vivian's." "I did what needed to be done," I replied firmly. "I've been—" He stopped, searching for the right word. "Uninformed." "About your career." "Uninformed." I couldn't help the sharp edge in my voice. "Dad, you weren't uninformed. You were dismissive. You introduced me as just a security guard to every single guest here." He flinched, guilt flickering across his face. "I didn't understand the nature of your work." "You never asked," I countered. "Not once in 7 years have you shown any interest in what I do. You decided my career was beneath you, and that was that." His shoulders sagged. "I thought you were working. Small jobs, mall security, nightclubs, things like that. And that would have made it okay to belittle me, to make me feel small in front of your friends." His silence was telling. Behind him, the television in the dining room continued playing, now showing my professional biography: Army veteran, criminal justice degree, senior security specialist with Meridian Protective Services. Donovan's eyes followed the words, briefly, before he looked back at me. His voice was softer now, quieter. "You protect important people." "Yes," I said. "Among other things, important people, like me." The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Double quotes. "Yes, Dad. People exactly like you." The weight of it hung between us. For years, he had dismissed my career as meaningless. Yet it was that very career that had saved him and everyone else at this wedding. Before he could respond, a staff member approached cautiously. "Miss Hartwell, there are media representatives asking to speak with you. The manager wanted to check if you'd like to make a statement." I shook my head immediately. "Tell them I'm not interested. Not right now." After the staff member left, Donovan looked at me with something almost like curiosity. "You don't want the publicity." "My career doesn't need it," I said flatly. "I didn't step in yesterday for recognition." "Then why did you?" he asked, genuine confusion in his tone. I hesitated, then said quietly, "Because it was the right thing to do. Because people were in danger. Because it's what I'm trained for. And because, despite everything, I couldn't stand there and watch you get hurt." For the first time in years, I saw his expression soften. The sharpness around his eyes eased. His voice broke slightly as he whispered, "Kaylin, I owe you an apology. Not just for yesterday, but for years." I didn't answer right away. My chest tightened with emotions I had buried long ago. Anger, longing, exhaustion. Thought his apology was a start. But a single sentence couldn't erase decades of dismissal. Before I could respond, the volume from the TV in the main room suddenly increased. Someone must have turned it up again. "We are now learning more about Kaylin Hartwell, the security professional who prevented what could have been a tragedy yesterday," the anchor said. Guests hushed once more. Donovan and I both turned toward the sound that the anchor continued. "According to Meridian Protective Services, Hartwell recently led security for the International Finance Summit, protecting over 30 top executives and government officials. She has received multiple commendations for her work in threat assessment and is considered one of the rising stars in the private security industry." On screen, Marcus Chen, my boss, appeared outside Meridian headquarters. "Kaylin exemplifies the highest standards of our profession. Her actions yesterday demonstrate the training, commitment, and courage our team brings to every assignment. We are incredibly proud of her." The room filled with murmurs and scattered applause. Guests who had ignored me the day before now clapped openly, some even standing to see me better. I felt my face flush, embarrassment mingled with a strange sense of vindication. For years, I had carried the weight of my father's disappointment, wondering if my choices truly mattered. Now, the entire world seemed to see what he never had. I turned back to Donovan. His eyes glistened not with tears, but with something close: shame, regret, pride, maybe all three at once, and in that moment, I knew our relationship would never be the same again. After the applause in the brunch room faded and people returned to their meals, I felt drained. My arm ached, my head pounded, and my emotions were stretched too thin. All I wanted was to leave, but Donovan wasn't ready to let me go. "Kaylin," he said, stepping close, lowering his voice so others couldn't hear, "we need to talk, just the two of us. This afternoon, before you leave." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk away, to tell him that years of indifference couldn't be patched over with one dramatic weekend. But another part of me, the part that still carried a flicker of hope, nodded, double quotes, "Text me when and where," I said. Later, that afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from him: "Top floor bar, 3 p.m, quiet place, just us." I almost didn't go. I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room, tugging the sleeve of my pantsuit over my bandaged arm, wondering if I was ready for whatever he wanted to say. But eventually, curiosity outweighed hesitation. The top floor bar was nearly empty when I arrived. Floor 2 ceiling windows stretched across the room, giving a breathtaking view of the ocean. My father sat at a corner table, 2 untouched glasses in front of him. He rose when I approached. "Club soda, with lime," he said, gesturing to one of the glasses. "I remembered you don't drink on duty, and after yesterday, I figured." I blinked, surprised he'd remembered such a small detail. "Thank you," I said, sitting across from him. For a moment, silence hung between us. He studied me as though I were a stranger. His polished image cracked in ways I'd never seen before. "I watched more of the coverage after you left the brunch," he said finally. "Security experts explaining exactly what you did. How you recognized the pattern, positioned yourself, used minimal force to maximum effect. It was like hearing about someone else except it was you, my daughter." I leaned back, my voice quiet but firm. "That's the problem, Dad. I've never been a stranger. I've been right here. You just never looked." His face twisted as if I'd struck him. "You're right. I deserved that." "This isn't about what you deserve," I said, my chest tightening. "It's about recognition. Basic recognition of who I am and what matters to me. You never gave me that." He looked down at his glass, then back at me. "I always thought I knew what was best for you. Law school, a stable career, the kind of success I understood. I wanted you to have more opportunities than I did. Financial security isn't the only kind of security," I countered. "And following someone else's dream isn't success. It's suffocating." His shoulders sagged. "I see that now. Yesterday, when that man had a gun to my head, do you know what I thought about? Not the firm, not the stock portfolio, not the houses. I thought about you, and your mother, and how much time I wasted chasing things that suddenly didn't matter at all." The rawness in his voice startled me. "And then there you were," he continued, his eyes glistening faintly, "stepping up, taking control, while trained guards backed away. You were magnificent, Kaylin, not because you made the news, not because people are calling you a hero, but because you were yourself, calm, capable, fearless, under pressure. I've never been prouder, and never more ashamed of how little I understood." His words landed heavy. For years, I had longed for his validation. Now that it was here, it didn't erase the scars. "Dad," I said slowly, "I appreciate what you're saying. I really do. But you need to understand something. I didn't suddenly become worthy of respect yesterday. I didn't transform into a different person just because cameras caught me in action. I've been this person all along, dedicated, skilled, committed to something I believe in. The only thing that changed was your perception." He nodded, his expression raw, stripped of arrogance. "You're right, and I can't take back the years of dismissal or the damage it caused. All I can do is tell you that my eyes are open now. I want to know my daughter, the real one, not the one I imagined you should be." I studied him carefully, looking for sincerity. For once, I saw it. "That would be a start," I admitted. A small, tentative smile crossed his face. "Your mother always said you knew your own mind better than anyone. she told me. Fighting your nature would only drive you away. She was right. The mention of Mom brought a bittersweet pang. Have you spoken to her since yesterday? I asked. Yes, he said, chuckling dryly. Briefly, she reminded me rather forcefully that she's been attending your professional award ceremonies for years without me. I couldn't help a small smile. That sounded exactly like Mom. There's one more thing I need to say, Donovan continued, his tone serious again. Thank you. Not just for what you did yesterday, but for being who you are, even when I failed to see it. That takes strength I'm only now beginning to understand. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside me. For the first time in years, the wall between us began to crack, not fully, not permanently, but enough to let light in. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our drinks, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond the glass. For once, silence didn't feel like a battlefield between us. It felt like a beginning. When I finally left the Rosewood Resort 2 days later, it didn't feel like an exit. It felt like stepping out of one storm and straight into another. The train ride back to the city was supposed to be quiet, but my phone buzzed almost nonstop. Reporters calling from numbers I didn't recognize, messages piling in from people I hadn't heard from in years, even strangers tagging me in social media posts, with shaky cell phone clips of the wedding chaos. Every time I thought about turning the phone off, another message from Mom or Taryn popped up, and I couldn't bring myself to disconnect. By the time I stepped off the train, I half expected cameras waiting on the platform. Thankfully, the crowd was ordinary commuters, students, tired workers. No press, no spotlights, just the hum of city life. I pulled my jacket tighter, grateful to disappear into the background again. Back at my apartment, the quiet hit me hard. After days of gunshots, shouting, and endless chatter, silence felt heavy. My bag slumped against the couch, and I collapsed onto the cushions. For a few blissful minutes, I closed my eyes, trying to forget the chaos. But peace didn't last long. My phone buzzed again, this time. Marcus Chen, my boss. Kalen. His steady voice came through when I answered. You, home safe? Yes, I said, sitting up straighter. Finally. Good. Listen, I won't keep you long. I just want you to know that the board has been flooded with calls from clients since the news broke. They're impressed, and they're asking for you specifically. I frowned. Asking for me? Yes, they saw what you did at the resort, how you handled it. They want that kind of protection. We're moving you into lead assignments immediately. The weight of his words settled in. Lead assignments, as in front-facing with clients, as in high-profile work, Marcus confirmed. International summits, corporate executives, government delegations. You've earned this, Kalen. It's overdue. I was silent for a moment, processing. Part of me felt pride. It was recognition I had worked years for, but another part of me wondered if I was ready for the attention that came with it. I'll be in the office tomorrow, I said finally. We'll talk more then. Good, Marcus replied. And Kalen, you handled yourself with courage and professionalism. The company couldn't ask for a better representative. When the call ended, I sat staring at the phone. The path in front of me was changing. Bigger roles, bigger risks, less anonymity. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. The next morning, the reality of the media storm hit me full force. I stopped by my usual coffee shop before heading into work, only to notice people staring at me. Not just casual glances, recognition. A couple whispered. One even nudged the other and pointed discreetly. When I reached the counter, the barista smiled nervously. Hey, you're that woman from the news, right? The wedding security guard? I forced a polite smile. Something like that. The barista handed me the cup with wide eyes, as though I might leap into action at any moment. I walked out quickly, cheeks burning. At the Meridian office, the atmosphere was no calmer. My coworkers applauded when I walked in, and someone had taped a newspaper clipping to my office door. The headline read, Veteran Security Specialist Foils Armed Robbery at High-Profile Wedding. I pulled it down immediately, tossing it into the recycling bin. Attention wasn't why I did what I did. Marcus met me in his office later that morning, laying out new assignments. We're moving you to lead protection for the Global Tech Summit next month. And there's talk of the International Humanitarian Forum later this year. I raised a brow. That's fast. He leaned back in his chair. The industry moves fast, and after what happened, your reputation speaks for itself. Clients trust you now. We can't ignore that. I nodded slowly. All right, I'll take it. But deep down, I wondered if I was stepping onto a stage I'd never escape. That evening, my phone buzzed again, this time. Donovan, I hesitated before answering Kaylin. His voice came through, softer than usual. I wanted to check on you. How's your arm? Healing, I said simply. That's good. Listen, I know I wasn't much of a father to you in recent years. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I want to try. Maybe dinner, sometime this week. Just the two of us. I sat in silence, caught off guard. In the past, Donovan's invitations were always wrapped in obligation, family functions, business dinners, events where I was more accessory than daughter. But this sounded different, tentative, almost humble. I'll think about it, I said carefully. That's all I ask, he replied. Take your time. After we hung up, I sat staring out my apartment window at the city lights. My career was moving in one direction, my family in another, and I stood in the middle, unsure where it would all lead. For the first time in years, though, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I had the power to choose how those paths would cross. The Global Tech Summit came faster than I expected. 1 month after the wedding, I found myself standing in the middle of a high-rise hotel ballroom, earpiece in place, eyes scanning every detail of the room. Unlike the chaos at the wedding, this was controlled, structured. I had a team, protocols, advance, intel. Guests were billionaires, CEOs, foreign dignitaries. People whispered about me when I walked past, not just because of what I did, but because now my name carried weight. And yet, I hated the attention. At one point during the summit, a reporter slipped past the rope line, microphone in hand. Ms. Hartwell, can you comment on the wedding incident? Do you think it's why you're leading this event's security? I stared at her calmly, my expression unreadable. No comment, I said firmly, before signaling my team to escort her out. But the question gnawed at me. Was I here because of years of training, or because a few viral videos made me recognizable? When the summit ended without incident, clients shook my hand, praising my professionalism. I accepted it politely, but inside I longed for quiet, for the kind of work that didn't require being a headline. 2 weeks later, Donovan called again. Kaylin, he said carefully, I meant what I asked before. Dinner. Just us. No speeches, no audience. Will you give me that chance? I hesitated. Part of me still bristled at the memory of him dismissing me as just a security guard. But another part remembered the look on his face during the robbery, the raw fear, the relief when I stepped in. Fine, I said finally. One dinner. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown. No cameras, no extended family, no associates from his firm. Just a small booth by the window, dim lighting, soft jazz playing in the background. He stood as I walked in, nervousness etched in his posture. That alone shocked me. My father, nervous around me. You look well, he said, pulling out my chair. Thanks, I replied, sliding into the seat. So do you. The first few minutes were stiff. We ordered, made small talk about the city, the weather, surface level things. But then Donovan leaned forward, his tone shifting. I've been replaying the wedding in my head every night. The moment that man pointed a gun at me, and the moment you stood between him and Vivian. I met his eyes steadily. I didn't do it for her, Dad, or even for you, necessarily. I did it because it was right, because people's lives mattered. In that moment, he nodded slowly. I understand, and I respect it, but it doesn't change the fact that you saved me. Whether you intended to or not, you did. Silence stretched between us as the waiter set down our meals. After he left, Donovan sighed. Kaylin, I know I've spent years making you feel lesser. I thought I was pushing you toward stability, success, but in truth, I was pushing you away. I see that now. I cut into my food, buying time. You never asked me what I wanted. His voice dropped. Because I was afraid of the answer, afraid it wouldn't match the image I wanted to present to the world. That's not fair to you. It never was. Something in my chest softened, just slightly. He was trying, not perfectly, but genuinely. I can't erase the past, he continued, but I can choose how I show up now, if you'll let me. I put my fork down and looked at him. I don't need a father who brags about me when it's convenient. I need one who listens, who sees me, even when the cameras are gone. His eyes glistened faintly. I want to be that man, Kaylin. If it's not too late. For the first time, I believed him. We finished dinner slowly, the conversation drifting to lighter topics. Mom's garden, Taryn's new job, small pieces of life we'd missed out on sharing for years. When we stood to leave, Donovan reached for his wallet, but I stopped him. I've got this one. He chuckled softly. Somehow I'm not surprised. Outside, the night air was cool, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. For once, walking beside him didn't feel like carrying a weight. It felt almost normal. Before we parted ways, he said, "Kaylin, I know rebuilding trust will take time, but thank you for giving me a chance tonight. I won't waste it." I nodded, pulling my jacket tighter around me. "We'll see, Dad. Actions speak louder than words." And for once, he didn't argue. He just nodded, accepting the truth of it. In the weeks that followed, Donovan began reaching out more. Short texts asking about my assignments, occasional phone calls just to check in. He wasn't overbearing, he was careful, tentative, as though he knew one wrong move could push me away again. And while I didn't fully lower my guard, I didn't shut the door either. Life felt different now. Bigger assignments. A father trying to reconnect. My name whispered in circles I'd never imagined. And yet, every time I looked in the mirror, I reminded myself of one simple truth. I hadn't changed overnight, the world had, and I had no choice but to keep walking forward. Months passed, and the wedding chaos slowly shifted from front-page headlines to archived news stories. The videos still lived online, racking up views, but the world had moved on. 2 new dramas, new scandals. For me, though, life hadn't gone back to normal. It had become something new entirely. At Meridian, I was now the lead on assignments I once only observed from the sidelines. The International Humanitarian Forum had been my latest post, and it went flawlessly. I coordinated a team of 30 operatives, liaised with foreign officials, and ensured that every guest left unharmed. It wasn't glamorous work. It was long hours, endless planning, and the kind of attention to detail most people overlooked. But it was my work I believed in, and for the first time, the world seemed to recognize its value. But recognition was never my goal. My goal was what it had always been, to protect, to make sure that when danger came, people had someone standing between them and the worst case scenario. One evening, I returned home to find a letter in my mailbox, not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter. The neat, looping script stopped me in my tracks. It was from Donovan. Inside, the words were simple, but they carried weight. "Kaylin, I wanted to put this on paper so you'd know it's real, not just spoken in passing. I'm proud of you. Not because of the news coverage, not because of the awards, but because of the woman you are. I've been blind for too long. You didn't change overnight, Tid, and I'm grateful you're giving me the chance to learn who you've always been. Love, Dad." I sat on my couch, reading it twice, then a third time. My chest tightened. For years I had dreamed of those words. Now they were here, inked in his handwriting, proof that he was trying. And yet, I realized something important. I didn't need those words to validate me anymore. I had built a life, a career, and a strength independent of his recognition. His pride was a gift, not a requirement. For the first time, that realization set me free. Weeks later, I stood at a charity gala, another one of Donovan's circles of influence. This time, I wasn't in the background, invisible, or introduced as just anything. Donovan stood at the podium, addressing the crowd of investors, philanthropists, and city leaders. I had attended reluctantly, at his invitation, prepared for another night of polite small talk. But then, his speech took a turn. "There's someone in this room who has changed the way I see the world," he said, his voice steady, carrying across the hall. "Someone who showed me that strength doesn't always look like boardrooms and bank accounts. Sometimes it looks like courage under fire. Sometimes it looks like my daughter, Kaylin." The crowd turned toward me. Applause filled the room. My cheeks burned, but this time, it didn't feel like false pride or borrowed glory. It felt genuine. Donovan's eyes met mine across the room, and for once, the pride there wasn't about him, it was about me. After the event, he approached quietly. No fanfare, no theatrics. "Thank you for letting me say that," he murmured. "You didn't ask my permission," I teased lightly. He smiled faintly. "True, but I hope I earned the right to say it." I studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You did." That night, as I walked home, the city lights shimmering around me, I thought about how far we had come, from being dismissed as just a security guard, to saving lives when no one else could, to finally standing tall, not for my father's approval, not for the world's recognition, but for myself. The scars of the past weren't erased. The tension wasn't gone forever, but the weight I had carried for years was lighter now, shared instead of ignored. And as I looked toward the future, the assignments, the risks, the relationships still mending, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. because I knew, no matter what storms came next, I was ready, and this time, I wouldn't be standing alone.